Nailed it. We're live. I forgot it's 7 something ish. I don't know. It's late. I am at the Dyno once again at West Tech Performance. Welcome, everybody. I got to run a 440-inch LS motor today. Worked out good. Although, as with every motor that we run, it's never a picnic. There's always things, and you'll be seeing in the video. Uh, One thing I can tell you is if you are going to run stuff on the dyno, make sure that the camera is always rolling. On 2 occasions, I just left the camera on for like 25 minutes. When I say camera, I mean my phone, because I don't, I'm not a high dig operation here. But I did leave it on, so I had to go in. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm still filming because I was filming a run, and then something happens, and then you start trying to fix it. And we had a pretty exciting day for me today. I got to do my very first tuning with Holley Terminator X because I had to, because something happened to the HP that we've been using for the last, I don't know, however long HP has been out. I think that they got one of the first ones. And so we've been using that, and it didn't want to cooperate, did not want to communicate anymore, no matter what we did. So we switched over to a Holley Terminator X, which is the only other one that we had. The people for Engine Masters, they have one, but it's all hooked up and it's all programmed and everything. I didn't want to touch that because they're going to be filming. They start, I think, tomorrow. So I didn't dare touch that and sneak in and pirate that and use it while they're not looking. So we did have a Terminator X, and so I learned how to do that. Thank you, big shout out to Eric from West Tech, who is I just have a lifeline, so I phone a friend, whatever I got to do. Said Eric, he said, "Hey Richard, look, you got this. It's not that hard." I'm like, okay. As long as somebody else has confidence in me, then I guess maybe I should have it myself. And actually, it turned out to work out great. We used the same harness. We hooked things up. I used the internal map sensor. I basically just took all the information that I had because we'd already run the thing already with the Holley HP that I normally use. That all worked good. I just took the information from there, transferred it, but it didn't want the same. I can tell you, it didn't want the same numbers in the file, despite the fact that I put the same injector size in and the displacement and all that. The file that I had it the way that it came from the HP did not work on. I had to modify it quite a bit. I had to change the fueling quite a bit. The timing was easy because we had just run basically, and where we were running this 440, we were not running it down low because it was a mass-headed, really big cammed. It had the carbon PTR intake manifold on it. So it wasn't running a lot of RPM, but we were only running it from maybe just below torque peak up to the horsepower peak. So it was pretty easy to tune, but after doing a couple of pulls on the HP, it went out. And so okay, how are we going to fix that? So we changed over. And when I changed over, we were, when we're running from near the torque peak to the horsepower peak, we're running on 91. This was like an 11-to-1 motor. We're running it fairly cold. So it basically wanted almost all the timing in anyway. So it's a very easy curve for wide open throttle, grab 3 cells, make them all 26, 27, 28, 29, whatever. And then, and for airfield, I had to make dramatic changes though. And the drivability stuff took a little bit of, and when I say drivability, I just mean transition from idle into going to wide open throttle. It took a little bit because this thing had a pretty big camshaft in it. It was pretty cantankerous, but it was not, so it was fairly, when I transferred the stuff over, put the values in, put the timing in, put all that stuff in, the motor fired up on the first pull, on the first try. So it worked out great. But as I said, not without incident. So there'll be some good stuff. But you're making some runs and you're making a pull and something happens and then you have to switch over to computers. Meanwhile, your camera is still going for 25 minutes or something. You're like, oh yeah, I better just delete most of that because most of that is just not going to be. It's sitting there basically watching the motor while we're fixing other stuff. So we get rid of that. But the cool thing is sometimes when you leave it on, good things happen. And so we got to catch some of the chaos that ensued in there. So that was good. And it's always good to spend time with my buddy Andy. He's good. The engine ran flawlessly, despite us trying to make it not do so. It worked out good. So I'll be doing a video on that. the poll for tonight is, despite the fact that the photo that I put up is, and I'll just ask this, this won't be part of the poll, but what is your guys' go-to, and I put this in the description of the video, and for people watching that are not part of the live crew, you guys can also join in, so please make sure to comment and like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. But what is your go-to method for, we all know, anybody who's worked on LS motors, we all know that the crank bolt, especially the factory one, the first time you're trying to take it off, is very, very stubborn. It has a lot of things going for it or against it or against you, because it's very, very tight. It's on there to beat the band, and it also has sealant on it, which tends to act as, a frictional form of Loctite is what I like to call it. So what is your thing? Do you heat it up to, loosen up the sealant? Do you use a really big impact? Do you, some people were suggesting the bigger, thicker weighted impact sockets. As you see in the photo, I use a gigantic breaker bar, and then people were asking, well, how did you hold it? For us on the dyno, it's not too bad because you have pretty easy access to stuff, even though we had headers on it. I just took the right size. I found the biggest Allen wrench that would go through the hole in the flywheel. And then when you turn it, it just locks itself basically against the block. So holding it was not a problem. Although I have to say, given the size of the breaker bar I was using, which also, and I didn't think of this, but the floor jack handle is another good source for that to slide over your ratchet. But we had a fairly lengthy piece of pipe. In fact, it was two pieces that were welded together. I had a fairly lengthy piece of pipe, and I was still worried about the strength of the size of the Allen, because I think it was a 1/4 inch Allen, and I think that's what would fit in the hole that was there. And it didn't go all the way through. I wanted a through hole, but it was not. So I locked that up, loaded it against the block, and then used the giant breaker bar, and it was still stubborn, but it came out. So it was, that was at the point where I stopped asking whether it was going to come out. And we have a big Milwaukee gun. It's a 1/2 inch gun, and it's an 18 volt, and it's got one of these giant sized batteries. It's even bigger than this one. I think it's an XC50. So it's an 18. I charged it all the way up. It had all the bars, but it still wouldn't take that off. And the odd thing is that balancer, or the damper, it's not a balancer, has been off before. In fact, it's been off many times because I've run lots and lots of cams through this. And I've also run the supercharger on it. We ran that Ford Racing 2.3 liter supercharger with the bottom end kit, the intake manifold, an adapter, and intercooler from Tom Demuse at Demuse Engineering. We ran that. And in fact, if you take a look at, I'm going to be posting this, but if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you can see I posted a short clip with what the crankshaft looks like when you spin that damper. It tore the crankshaft up pretty good. I had asked people whether or not that this thing should be replaced, and it's deep enough to where I would be concerned that this might start crack propagation. And because it's not a matter of whether you can feel it with your finger, it's how deep your finger goes into the giant groove that's in there now. So if I'm doing some, if I wanted to do some real performance stuff and put this in a vehicle, or if I wanted to, Tom Nelson, are you listening? If I wanted to do a big bang on this motor, it would definitely have to get another crankshaft, just another stock one, not anything crazy, but another stock one, because it's pretty bad. But one of the things that I asked on the Instagram thing was like, hey, normal stuff. Should I replace this, or just slap back on there and rev it? Everyone's saying, send it. And that's what I did. I ran another 3 or 4 cams with it, and we ran a bunch of stuff on. I ran a bunch of testing with spark plug gap and just all kinds of cool stuff on that 5.3, and it's still running. It's still running good for what started out and is still basically a junkyard motor. It's only a cam and springs and headers, basically junkyard L33, which is really good. So we ran all that testing, and the crankshaft is a little questionable. So naturally, what I'm about to do is put another questionable motor on there, and that will be the poll for tonight. So answer the question: what is your go-to method for taking the LS crank damper bolt off because we know that those can be stubborn. They're fairly tough. And whenever somebody puts them back on, they almost always don't use factory torque spec, which is like 240 or 250 foot-pounds. It's a lot. And when they do it, if they do it, they redo the same one that they took off. They don't replace it, which I think you're supposed to replace it. So it's all of that. And I don't ever remember replacing one on putting factory dampers on and off many, many times. And that reminds me, James Short and Brian Tooley, shout out to those guys, because I think I'm definitely going to adopt their method of, I really, when I went back to visit them, I really like their method of swapping cams. It's so much faster. One of the things I hate, the thing that I hate most about swapping cams is, even more than getting oil all over everything, is the water. When you have to, the way that I do it, I've been taking off of the water pump and taking the damper off, take the front cover off and all that stuff. But the way that they do it is, it's a two-piece cover, that's fairly easy to do. So it's got a number of things going for it. It's a two-piece cover. There's no water pump on it. They just have lines going to both of the water pump outlets. And then they have a remote. I think theirs is run through the dyno, but we would run it with we have a Mazir remote pump. So you just run fittings and then lines out to the remote pump. And then basically you're just taking the Mazir electric water pump off of the front cover. So you have access to the front cover, especially if you've cut the front cover in half and now it's two-piece. And if I'm doing cam swaps, quite honestly, I really don't care if it leaks a little bit. I just put tape over it or silicone or whatever. I know that they make two-piece covers that probably have O-rings in them or something, and that would be fine. But the other problem that they did, which I thought was really slick, the other thing that you overcome is, it's difficult to get the camshaft out because it wants to hit on the damper. So what they did was just clearance their damper a little bit. I mean, I know it throws the balance off, but it's not very much. And the other thing that I think I would do, I would get a smaller damper, which I think ATI has some. I'd get a smaller damper and then pin it and then make it a slip fit. Well, I wouldn't even have to do that. If I just put a smaller damper on there, you don't have to pin it though, because if it's an ATI, it's not, I guess we could make it a press fit too, but it'd just be easier if to have it go on and off later. But if you made it smaller, you wouldn't have to remove it. You made it smaller, the cam would come out, and all of that I think would work well. So that I'd like to do that, especially when I'm doing, 4 or 5 cams at one time. It makes it a lot faster. I mean, I'm fairly efficient at taking off both sides. Then you go to the front, but when you do that, water gets all over everywhere. I don't ever drain the block. I used to also drain the block, but even if you drain the block, when you take the water pump off, there's still residual water in the water pump, and you dump that out and it goes all over everywhere. You try to put buckets under it or trays but it finds a way to get all over. And then what happens is, I don't do this too much, but lots of people do, is they just walk into the dyno and then they're not looking where they're walking. My pet peeve. So if you're at a dyno with me or anybody else, watch where you're walking, don't step through the water, and then start tracking the water everywhere else around the shop. Because then you don't have to just clean the dyno room, you have to clean everything, because then now there's little footprints everywhere where everybody went, all the little Keebler elf footprints. So I don't like that. So if I can eliminate having to deal with the water at all, that'd be fantastic. If I can just take the front cover portion off, if the water pump's already out of way, all of that would be awesome. So I think I'm going to try to work on that and make that the go-to LS thing. And even if I'm the only one using it, I'm okay, because I'm usually the guy that's swapping all the cams anyways. So that works out just fine. So that's my plan. But the poll for tonight, should I hit the 4.8 liter? Okay, so the poll for tonight, and I will explain this. So here's the poll for tonight. Should I get the broken 4.8 liter junkyard motor that I have running? So here is my hurdle, so you guys understand why you're doing the poll. here are the hurdles I have to overcome. And again, it's life. They're not insurmountable. The 4.8 liter I got when the same time that I got the 5.3 L33. Big score on an all aluminum 533 or a 5.3 liter, the L33. Also got a 4.8. This is going to be great. We got a 4.8, we got a 5.3, we got everything we need. We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I can make the big bore version of the 4.8. I can do weird stuff, try to put rec port heads on. I can do all kinds of stuff. Except that the one that I got doesn't run. And for guys that have been here for a while, you saw, because I posted videos of what we tried to do with that thing. So here are all the things that it had. It had, on one side, had a broken push rod and a bad lifter. On the other side, had a broken rocker. And when I said broken rocker, the rocker wasn't broke. The bolt was broke, and the boss was broke. The bolt boss was broke. And the rocker and the bolt and the broken piece were, he attempted to glue that back together. And obviously the push rod's not going to make that work. It doesn't like that. And it doesn't like spring pressure resistance and all that. And not only that, but that didn't just happen before that motor went into the wrecking yard. It had been run a long time. So much so that both of those cylinders were almost, one of them was almost completely filled up and clogged with like carbon deposits. I had to like chip it out of there. The other side, not as bad, but there was a lot in there. I had to go in and get it. In fact, it's not even all out yet. So here's what I have. I've taken this motor apart. The cam was bad because that one lifter was bad. So here's what I have to do. I think the short block's okay, although two of the pistons had a whole bunch of buildup on it, but I can, ship those out, vacuum it. I don't care about that. That'll all work. I might even have to do the Super Richie ball hone on those I need to see how bad the cylinders are. So potential ball hone, certainly razor blade rebuild, maybe at least one head, although we have already, Troy long ago helped me. We welded nuts onto all, because of these things also had one full side, all of the exhaust manifold bolts were broken off. And so we had to weld nuts on them and back them out. We got all those out. Spent a lot of time and energy on cylinder heads that really should have just been thrown away. Because the other problem was where the boss broke for the rocker stud or for the rocker bolt, we kind of fixed that. Another bolt will go in there now because we've tapped it and it will kind of hold, but only half of it is there for some of the thread length. So it's not going to be ideal. I think it would work on the dyno, but it's not going to be great. I'd be much better off just putting a different head on it. The other side I think will work. I need to replace the cam. I've already got another lifter for it. I got to at least put a valve in one side, and that head might work. The other one I think will work. It bent a valve. That was the side that bent the valve. I need a valve in that. I have spare valves from other junky. I have some 706 heads that I think have cracks between the intake and the exhaust, which is not uncommon. It needs that. It needs, there are all the bolts in the front cover are missing. The head bolts are now gone. I don't know where they are, but I think I have for all this stuff. So that's my question. My question is, should I get that motor running again? Should I spend the time to get that running? I want to run it carbureted, and ideally, I'd like to get it running. If it works and it's okay and it's making power, then I could bring that back and get that to Oliver so that he can put that in the Nova, which would be good. So let me know in the poll whether or not I should spend tomorrow doing that. It's going to be a little bit of work to get all of that done just so I can have a 4.8 on the dyno. But it's a 4.8, it's on the dyno, and then I could do a cam swap while I'm there. I probably will we'll run the stock cam. I think right now, maybe I've swapped the L30 cam into it, the factory cam that came out. So I could run it with that and then put the Truck Norris low lift cam in it, maybe something like that. We'll see. So let's see how your guys' day is. Mexico's in the house. What's up? I rebuilt my LS157. It's been sitting on my truck with a tarp over for 5 months. I think it will be okay to crank it to life a couple months when I get everything else. Yeah, it wouldn't be bad idea for you to go out and just spin it over by hand, but it should be fine. Swapping cams is counterproductive to progress. Engine builder or hot rodder should spec the cam for the combo. I don't know if that's directed at me, but if it is, that's just silly. That's just silly talk. Do you disagree with bumping the starter while? Oh, Darren, this is another good one too. A couple of guys commented on this, and I've actually tried this before on a Z, and not on purpose because the ratchet was still on the thing. Bumping the starter has always worked for me. Just make sure you have the breaker bar on the correct side. Yeah, that's true. Do you disagree with bumping the starter while a socket and cheater bar on the damper bolt? No, that works. You're just using starter leverage, and that's the same thing as you yanking on it. The only thing it doesn't work on is Hondas. That's right. Sounds like all the issues were caused by the wrong cam. They were, but it wasn't entirely the wrong cam. It was just one wrong. Well, it's two wrong lobes. Would you film fixing the 4.8? I did already, but it will definitely be for a video, and we'll run a carburetor on the LS because the Andy that has that 440 that we ran, that was his ECU that he took. Of course, we want to hear the details about your decision-making process. Yeah, once you see how broken stuff is, but it's, it can all be fixed. I almost want to put the heads that are on it that still have a bunch of buildup in there and see if we can clear that out by fuel and or maybe water methanol or something. Having all the bolts broken on one side should have told you all that you needed to know. Actually, had I just pulled the valve cover off, it would have told me what I needed to know about that particular motor. Removed my 4853 block and motorcycle, bunch of stuff to do. They started putting the wiring harness back on the 2500 6.0. Nice, getaway, good job. Caps, I'm building a 6-liter LS video. That you did. I'm starting with an LQ4. I'm going to do the trick flow heads and 469 cam. I'm going to put it in my 86 Camaro. That'll be good. What computer system? I don't know. Now I'm Terminator X and Holly HP, and I've done fast, and I've done a little bit of Megasquirt stuff, the MS3 Pro, thanks to with help from Eric. Any benefit running turbo oil drain return in the oil pan versus the front timing cover on an LS? I don't think that there's any difference. I don't know if would you get more chain oiling? Would there be more drag? I don't know. I know that there's an argument always about the oil going to one side or the other of the pan, depending on the rotation, because you're trying to feed it against the natural, because it's not just the rotation of the crank, it's all of the ensuing chaos that happens, and because it grabs a lot of stuff with it, so it's slinging stuff up a lot. I so much want to see what's going on in there, and so that you can show people, hey, look, here's what happens when you put a drain in there and put it on the wrong side. Did you get the email I sent you, the Dodge Head 655, of how big the intake opening? Yeah, Mark, I think didn't you send photos of that? Spent yesterday and today wiring your car with a painless kit. You're ready to yank your hair out. I've only ever used one painless setup, and when I say I did, I mean my buddy Bernie did in our World Challenge car, and because he did the wiring on it. But it seemed to work. He liked it. It seemed to work pretty well. Could you do a video where you play with the start of injection timing after a cam swap? I've read talk about significant power variations if not adjusted properly. I can tell you that we have played with injector timing. I have, and Eric has. I don't know if maybe Ish has too. And I've never seen what anybody would call significant gains, like 1 or 2 horsepower or whatever. It's not very much in all the times that we've tried it. Fixed my buddy's motorcycle last night. The clutch was flat, so that was fun. Picked it up today. Watch the wiggling finger video again. That is good. It might make it idle smoother with injector timing. I could see that. I was talking to Mark Sanchez last a bunch about, we were talking about different things that affect emissions, and he was going over the fact that, like, on, for instance, on the 03 Cobra motor, they actually have different spark plugs on one side than they do on the other because of the way that the coolant flows. And so they were that particular and about emissions, and it affects that. So if you change anything, for the emissions guys, changing the thermostat would be a major thing. Changing spark plugs from one style of spark plug, even the same heat range, from one style of spark plug to another, is a significant change. And I don't know what their rating for significant is. Significant change in emissions output. And so that's one of the reasons that Mark was saying that the OEMs, why they say, hey, look, these spark plugs will last 100,000 miles. They don't want you changing the spark plugs because it changes the emissions. Even so much that the torque spec on spark plugs affects emissions. So it was an interesting conversation. Any experience with upgrading Ellis rockers with bronze bushings as opposed to the typical trunnion upgrade? Is one better than the other? I've never done any sort of detailed analysis of each of those. I think that would have to be more with longevity. Did you see the Honda gave Hoonigan the IndyCar engine? I saw that. That is really cool. What I mean, flat, I meant there was no clutch material left. So it was all the way down, yeah. Materials, clutch material, just like brake materials, overrated. So how's our poll doing? Are people wanting to see the 4.8 put back together and brought to life? How can 27% people say no on that? What's with that? Terminator X. So maybe from now on, everything needs to be Terminator X. So Holly, guys, if you're out there, I need a Terminator X now. And it's just so similar to the stuff that we were doing on the HP. The fueling table is a little bit different, and it has much more resolution unless you select the large screen where it has a much more resolution, and then you can go in and nitpick stuff. Because what always happens, and this is tuner stuff. So when you look at the air fuel ratio curve, you'll see it go across, and then what always happens is we're tuning. Let's say we're tuning in 500 RPM increments. So we got, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500, yada, 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 all the way up. And then we normally don't put a lot of resolution. We have, 0 RPM and then 500 and 1,000, and then it jumps up to 2,000, 3,000, whatever. Because we don't tune down there that much. At least I don't when we're on the dyno. But what always happens is if you take a look at the air fuel curve, you get some sort of, like, it's all going nice and smooth at 3,500, and at 4,000 is smooth. But at 3,750, that's where you have a dip, and you can't go tune that because all you can do is grab stuff on either side of it, and then you could bring the whole thing up, but it still has this like V in it, either up or down. And to get it, you have to go to the big map and then go to the 4250 or the 4750 or the 3750 and go to that number and tune that, and then you can make it all nice and flat. But again, it doesn't do anything to power, but it just makes the curve look better. So everybody feels all warm and fuzzy because the curve's like nice and flat. it is nice having the curve be at least relatively flat, because then you could make global changes. Like we did that on the 440-inch motor today. I'm like, well, and I always do this because I want to make sure that the reading that we're getting on the dyno correlates with what the motor wants. So let's say we're running it at 12.6 or 12.7. Does it really like that? We don't know if we don't try anything else. So we lean it out 3 clicks. So when we take fuel away, is it trending that it likes it? If we add fuel, is it trending that it likes it? I honestly don't care what the number is. I always do that to find out if I'm missing something by putting it where I normally would put it. Same thing with timing. We'll start adding timing until it just doesn't do anything else. And then that's enough timing. We even, in this case, when we were running it to, I don't know, 6,700 or something. And I'm like, this has got a big cam in it. This thing should make power higher than this. I wonder if it's flattening out and then it's going to go back up, because I've had that happen. So let's rev it a little bit higher and see if I have a second curve on it. Because I've been bitten by that one time, other times here at West Tech, but on the chassis dyno, on my dyno jet, I was running a Bonneville car, a Civic, for my buddy John Hansen. Shout out to John, who ended up getting my Civic. But he had a little white hatch that had a good motor in it. And I kept telling him, this thing's making like, I don't know, whatever the number is, 212 or 218 at the tire, or whatever, doing really good. He said, no, that it makes a lot more than that. Every time we've run it, it makes more than that. I'm like, I'm a dyno guy. I know everything. It doesn't make. He goes, no, it really does. He said, how high are you revving it? I said, well, I'm revving it until the power kind of flattens out, and then I don't need to rev it any higher. Actually, you do. And so I needed to rev it to 9,000 or 9,200 or whatever the number was, instead of the 8,500 or whatever, where I was going, and thinking, hey, it has this intake manifold on it and has this big air tube on it and stuff. And lo and behold, I revved it higher and it got another little VTEC jump, and it made like 240 or whatever at the tires. And so we live and learn. That's what happens. And so that's why I try that stuff, irrespective of how much people know. You got to try things. And that's the reasoning that I brought when I was doing Engine Masters. I'm like, well, I know everybody tells us that this doesn't work, but that shouldn't stop us from trying it, because maybe it will be worth something on this combination and not on another combination. Besides, then I could, if nothing else, then I can say that, hey, I tried this and here's what happened when I tried it. I can't just say, oh yeah, everybody says this doesn't work. Then I'm another one of those guys. I don't want to be that guy. It's faster and easier to go pull another 4.8. It probably really is. Darren, I've got an LQ4 with my own personal port job, 243 heads. Will this cause issues getting tuned? Having it ported? Got stage 2 truck cam. I ported the stalker lump and exhaust mainly. Porting your heads, if you're going to get it tuned anyway, the tune will make all that work. Biggest downside of Terminator X is lack of internal data logging like HP. It doesn't, we didn't do any data logging when I was running, because I very rarely do that. But because I look at what the dyno is telling me, we do data log some stuff, especially on the turbo stuff. But we didn't on this NA motor. But does the Terminator X not have data logging? Woody's, what's up from your Honda buddy? Good. To answer your question from yesterday, yes, I'm trying to mock up the 112 to slap it on the Jackson Racing manifold. Okay. Is there room in the engine bay to fit that? The mouth looks the same size and the bolts line up. Cool. Just have to figure out which snout I have to use to line the belt up. Yeah. So, Ark, the key is to sing along to Foreigner. I'll have to try that. In the Gen 5 Facebook group, there's a guy putting an LT head on LS block with custom cam for intake exhaust valve order. Do you think those Frankensteins will pick up traction? I don't. I don't think that they will. Only like they would if the other option from the LS family was that they didn't have good heads available, but they do. And also, where are all these heads coming from? Like, how cheap is a head? And then how cheap is the custom cam that you have to have, and the push rods, and the intake manifold, and the headers? So it's a fairly big swap. And how much more do you get with that head than what's already available? Like, I think a guy, if he ported a set of rec port heads, he would be doing pretty good. James, what was the Terminator X question? I don't remember asking one. Easier to do it in the shop than on the salt. Yep. What would it take to mount an AC VW engine? I don't know. I'd have to ask if they've ever run a VW. It obviously would take a bell housing. The question was how he liked Terminator X versus HP2. For me, they do the thing because they just adjust air fuel and timing, and that's all I'm trying to do. Let's see, Richard, is there a way you can show how much metal you get out of the 4.8's oil galleries when you clean it? It would be interesting to see how much cam material is in. How much cam material is in where? The answer will always be make it run. That's right. Aside from valve train and rod bolts, what's needed to replace for an LS to hold 8,000? You don't need to change the rod bolts for that. Terminator X has data logging via laptop or the 3.5-inch screen with an SD card. So we run it with a laptop. Bots are in the house. We always, when I'm running an HP, we always have the laptop hooked up anyway, because that's what we're watching. Wish more people made lives, like you explain different scenarios with different motors. Yeah, there's a lot of trial and error. Put a World War II W12 engine on. Old point systems had point float problems from roughly to 6,500 to 7,000, and the quality of the points. Valve float was another issue. Weigh in on the modern take on that. I don't know what you mean. To say that point systems had valve float in that RPM range, generalizing that is not accurate. There are guys that ran point setups way higher than that. So that's not an absolute. Did some of them have points float? Yes. Were dual point setups maybe better? Probably. Have you seen the new Summit Racing LS steel turbo exhaust manifold? It looks like it runs the exhaust around behind the engine. I showed last night the headers that Hooker sells, and I really like them, but I haven't seen, the other one is kind of like the, is it like the Holly unit? Is there a factory LS cam that you like for a daily driver, strip car? An LS7 cam would be terrible for a daily driver 5.3. Same thing with an LS9. That would be awful. It'd be so soft, you would hate it. It's going to be hard to make more power than the stock LM7 cam in an LM7 if factory or factory cams are your only choice. The HO cam, like the L33 cam, the one that I tested, I think that that's what it was. And then the later 6-liter cam, both were pretty good. They made a little bit more power, not a lot, but some. But all the rest of them, LS1, LS2, LS3, LS6, they all traded power quite a bit compared to the LM7 cam in a regular 5.3. So just valve train. Well, it's not just valve train. It's not just valve spring. It's the key to running that sort of RPM is the camshaft. The camshaft has to be stable, and it has to be stable working with the correct spring, not just spring pressure, but spring oscillation. It has to be, the frequency has to be right. They almost have to be a matched set to get them to run. And they have to be matched also because the rocker arms can throw that off. The push rods can throw that off. All of that stuff can cause bounce or float or instability, which even if the thing will run to 8,000, which it might, the cam profile needs to be made, and the rest of the parts in the motor, mostly the heads of the intake manifold, also have to be designed to make power up there if that's what you want to do. Just revving it there is not going to do anything. If you make peak power at 6,000, but you're revving it to 8,000, you're just doing it to rev it. But if you're doing it to make power up there, the other things have to be designed to do that. And it takes a little bit to get that done. Oliver's in the house. Rich, sounds like your 4.8 is as bad as the one I have in the shop. You're just tuning it? You're tuning your 4.8? Did you get it running? Recommended sealer for rocker arm threads on a ported head. I think we would normally do just thread sealer. The other thing I can recommend, an important safety tip, is don't over torque the bolts on the cam retaining plate on an aluminum motor. An aluminum motor will take a lot less abuse than an iron motor will. It doesn't like you having your gun like this. But one of these Milwaukee's with, you had just set it on 4 to take some bolts out, and then it was on 4, and you went to put the 10mm headed cam retaining plate bolts on, and you're, just going to run them in and then tighten them. Yeah, it's 2 of them are stripped out. So don't over tighten them in an aluminum block. Single plane intake. I'm not going to run a single plane intake on the 4.8. That's not a good choice. Sound keeps cutting out. The signal here is no good. Ryan, now the easy out broken the bolt. That's kind of tough. You can try heating it up. Getting the easy out is going to be a little bit more difficult. Harden tip punch and hammer and crack it out. Hardened tools are brittle and will break out. Good. I'm not a fan of stroker motors due to the cylinder wall wear and how far the piston is pulled down in the bore. That just begs for piston rock. I do a Forge 340 before a 408 if you're doing a turbo. The thing about and that's a good point, James, is that if you're doing a turbo and you have the turbo can supply all the power that you want to make, there's not really a need to go to stroker one. This is a cast stainless manifold, like the Holley one, but you can get it with the T4 flange. Looks like it would fit more vehicles compared to the Holley one from design. Cool. Someone just released it 2 weeks ago. I'll have to check it out. One of the Holley guys, my boy Evan, was here, and he actually had something very cool. He had I think he's going to put Ram Air 5 heads on it. That's awesome. How much power will a stock 5.3 intake make versus an eBay high ram? I didn't know that eBay made a high ram, so I'm not familiar with that. But if you look at the video that I have up where I tested all of the factory intake manifolds, you can see how they all do. A high ram and or a sniper style, if you're talking about the fabricated sheet metal ones, people buy those for looks. They make a little bit more power at the very, very top, like past 6,500 RPM, which normally is not where people run their motors. So did somebody copy the high ram? I haven't seen a high ram copy. What experience have you had running fuel management unit on? You mean the old FMUs, the rising rate regulators? I have a lot of experience with that. In fact, I bet I've run a motor longer at wide open throttle with an FMU than probably anybody. Richard, I recently built the Gen 4 5.3 LS with Ford Summit Pro LS pistons. After the break-in, I noticed some piston slap. Would you consider this normal? You only have 3 thousandths piston to wall clearance? That actually doesn't seem like enough. Anyone know if I'll have to cut the front of my hood if I use a Holley high ram front throttle body on a Mustang? I think that you will. Do you recommend the best cam for my 6-liter full-size truck? 4-door just seems too heavy for the engine power with a stage 2. So what stage 2 do you have in it right now, Darren? Some steals what beer money runs, but Holley intakes for the. How was the conversion on the crankcase oil fill tube? Oh, the filler neck, is that what you're talking about? Andy brought that and he put it on. It looked good. It worked good. Garcia, let's see. Oh, so Derek did it. 3 thousandths is what he. 3 thousandths, you shouldn't be hearing piston slap. It should definitely go away as soon as it gets any sort of temperature in it. The 4.8 and 5.3 Scott are for the small turbo tests you're going to do. No, I've had these for a long time. They've had these for more than a year now. I think you get better atomization on longer intakes like a tunnel ram, and that helps both power and economy. Get better atomization really because the fuel is injected down at the port in the same spot anyway. What you get is extra torque from runner length. That's from reflected waves. And a tunnel ram or a high ram. Here's a good example of a tunnel ram right here. Is actually not very long, not relative to a factory intake manifold. A factory LS intake manifold is a lot longer and makes a lot more average power up to 6,500 compared to a high ram. I'd like to see a test running an FMU versus ECU tuning. So you want to see if are we going to be tuning the FMU? Like the FMUs when they first came out were like 12-to-1. And then they had 10-to-1s, and then they made adjustable ones so that you could, by changing inserts, you could change the rate of gain basically of the FMU. So instead of 10 pounds of extra fuel pressure per 1 pound of boost, you could lower it down to a more realistic amount. Because basically what they were doing is just clamping the thing shut and letting the pump just jack the pressure all the way up to over, in my case, over 100 psi. And that's not the problem is that it will add more fuel, but it's adding all of the fuel. And also, as you up in RPM, the amount of fuel that the it makes life hard on the pump too. So it's not a very precise way of adding the specific amount of fuel that a motor needs compared to an ECU. Richard, question for you. If you're running a full-blown turbo car, would you run a turbo cam versus an off-the-shelf cam? I don't know what you mean by a full-blown turbo cam. What is the situation? What is the engine size? What is it? What am I trying to do? What is the power level? I would achieve that with whatever cam it is. It's not a choice of a turbo cam versus a non-turbo cam, because I think I know what you're trying to ask here. I would just get a cam that allows me to make the power that I need to make, whatever that is. If I want to make 1500 or 2000 or more than that. Do I have a preferred brand of camshafts? No, I like testing everything. I tend to test more stuff in the past, certainly because of their association with the guys here at Westech from Comp Cams. Brian Tooley on the LS side, I've tested a lot of. I've tested Cam Motion stuff. Clay Smith. I've tested a few Texas Speed cams, but I'd like to do more. No, Matt, you better take all of that back. Thank you very much, but you don't need to do that. Obviously, I'm gonna have to send you an engine for that. Now that COVID is over, that would be nice if it was. Yeah, hit the like button. No, man, what are you doing, man? I guess he just set the bar, right? Full-blown turbo cam, one with way too much LSA. Is that what it is? Call Cam Motion and have them spec it to your build. I don't. What I do is not that. What I do is show people what happens when we run. What happens if we run this cam? What happens if you run a cam that's spec to your build? What happens if you run another one that has 2 degrees less or more duration? Or change in LSA? Or change in lift? What happens? I guarantee you that the one cam with whatever specs that are made for your build, your S475 6-liter LS motor, there's only about 1,000 other cams that will also work. I guarantee that. Guaranteed. Yeah, I know. The bar is up here. Actually way up there. "32 nomads in the house." You're gonna send me $1 million? Well, hurry up and win. So a twin S480, so something like, I don't know, what's that? 2,400 or something like that? 2,500 maybe? Intake for 427 Windsor high ram. Victor CNC 225 heads. 106 LSA, 258, 264. So you're gonna run like a centrifugal blower on that or something? Nomad, you didn't do that? I wonder who did. Bot's got a new trick. Uh-oh. Just paid for my trip. If you meant to tip $5, I'll send it back to him. I'll mail it back to him. Like to see a small split versus a big split cam, 224, 228, 220, 232. Well, you're in luck. Gotta test it just that. See, people ask me stuff. Have you tested this? Yes. Yes, I have. The sloppy stage 2, 228, 230. And then some Brian Tooley cams that have a lot more split than that. Richard, how about a Gen 4.5 LSLT hybrid build? So do you want to put LT stuff, like bottom end stuff in the LS? Richard now has World Series of Poker. I don't have a poker face. Have you done a dyno comparison on compression? Same engine with 9-to-1 versus 14-1 with a. So you can't say this, Steve. You can't say with a cam to take advantage of the compression because the camshaft will work with both of those compressions. And I know that people have a hard time understanding that, but I'll tell you what. You pick whatever cam that you want for the high compression engine, and it will still work on the low compression engine. It's going to make less power, not because it's the wrong cam. It's going to make less power because the lower compression is going to make less power. In fact, it's going to be 3 to 4% per 1 point in compression. And yeah, we have tested that. The problem with changing compression is that you can't only change that. Something else has to change, especially doing a big swing like that. Not 9-to-1 to 14-to-1 is kind of a ridiculous amount because lots and lots have to change there. You're at the very least, if you, I don't know that you could get all that from dome profile. You probably couldn't unless it's a fairly big motor. But you're going to have to go from a dish to a big dome. You're going to have to change the weight of the piston assembly. You're going to have to change the combustion chamber size. You're going to have to change a lot of things that might also change power. That's not just compression. Dulcich did one where they went from like 9 to 12 or something like that. I think he did it by stacking gaskets. But the problem is you're also changing quench with that. And so you're changing other things. And some of those other things, as people like to argue about, also have an effect on power. And once you go, like the sweet spot for me is like 8-to-1 to 12-to-1. You get pretty good gains in there. Below that and above that, the gains start getting less. If you run a turbo with a stock GM computer, any issues or just a Holly one? I've never run a stock ECU. Well, I can't say that. I have run a stock ECU on the engine dyno, but it was on an LT and it was an L83, and it's because it was the only way that we had to run it at the time. I didn't run a turbo on that though. I did run a turbo on a Coyote, an early Coyote with the factory ECU, but the problem is that it's difficult to tune like that. Not difficult because the computer can't do it, it can, but difficult because it takes so long to program it between each run. I can't just go, oh, look, it's 10-to-1, it needs to be 12.5-to-1. And I just do that really quickly. And in 10 seconds, that's done and it's ready to go. When you do that on a factory computer, it takes 10 minutes. And then you got to load the program, get it all done, and then you got to wait again. Then you got to warm the motor up, and it's a whole thing. So that's why we don't normally use factory computers. But the factory computer, as Matt has shown, like with the LS stuff, the factory computer can be run without any problem with turbo motors, all that stuff. He has tunes for those, with injector sizes and all that, and it does work. It just changes the airfield, it changes the timing, it changes the two things that you really need to change for that, and it works pretty well. So if you're building a pump gas 632, what compression would you need? It depends on how much power you want to make. Is there a go-to book you recommend for learning turbo stuff? Yeah, get Corky's book. There's a couple of good ones. Hugh McKinn's has a turbo book. There's a Superpowers book. Corky Bell has a book. You can look up, if you just go and search books on turbocharging, there's a few of them, and those are good ones. Will certain cams drop compression? They will never drop static compression. They'll drop dynamic compression. Maximum boost, that was Corky Bell's, yeah. Putting LT heads on LS, L83 heads on a 6-liter. I don't think I'd put L83 heads on a 6-liter. I think I put LT1 heads on a 6-liter. But Brian, if you check out Brian Tooley's stuff, if you check out his Instagram and Facebook stuff, and probably they've done it on YouTube already, and I'm going to do a video on it, but they've already put LT heads on an LS3 and compared them with a bunch of different stuff, different ported heads and all kinds of stuff, and made good power with them because they ran milled ones and ported ones, and it's some pretty good stuff. But it's more of a, again, it's more of a gee whiz thing than it is a super practical thing. Because even if you can do it, the question is, should you? And more importantly, will the market do that? Because we were talking about that way long ago when I was doing L83 stuff. I'm like, well, the L83 head is a lot better than a factory 706 or 862 head. And so it'd be cool if you take that head and put it on a 5.3. So Brian and I are brainstorming like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should do that. And then we started thinking, okay, well, what else needs to change? You can make the head fit on there. That's not a problem. But rockers and intake manifold and headers and camshaft and so pretty soon it becomes not well, we're just going to find a cheap head from the wrecking yard that's a lot better than the head that we have. Now it's a lot of other things, and now is it really a worthwhile option rather than just getting ported 5.3 heads, which are going to be really, really good. Factory ECMs can't do boost by gear, yada. Yeah, we know all that, yada yada yada. That's why people put aftermarket stuff on there. But it can, but for the average guy can get a factory computer in his truck, run a turbo on it, and it works. $242 cam motion is a good cam, over 11-1 with the big turbo LS. Okay. So have you tried something else? This would be my question. That on what displacement motor is that voltage? 11-1 on a big turbo LS. So like a big turbo, is this like a 103 millimeter single, or is it twin S480s or S485s or something? So Nomad, you didn't authorize that? Somebody got into that and sent it? Why would they send it to me? Well, go get your stuff taken care of with your bank account. Turbo TBS on an E67 factory ECM runs great. Owner is considering Holly, but he has to worry about emissions. Okay. So Nomad, you'll figure that out tomorrow. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. You're going to get the best of Olivia Newton-John. Olivia Neutron Bomb. Olivia Newton-John, was she Australian? I think she was, right? Yeah, the bank, you don't have to go down to the bank to get money. You just call your credit card and they will take care of it. There's somebody home at the credit card. So how is our poll doing? Because it's almost time to go. 74% saying yes, but I should get that 4.8 liter up and running. Richard, Nomad send Richard an email. Yeah, he needs to talk to his bank right now. The whatever he sent or whoever sent it is not going anywhere. How would a Victor Jr. fare with combo, or should I use a high RAM? Plan to race. Ryan, it's been so long. Tom. Yeah, you can give me a call tomorrow. Do you have a set schedule for live feeds? Normally there's 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time at night, and then I also do one in the morning sometimes. I've been doing the morning one at West Tech because I've just been doing stuff in the morning. Yeah, yeah. I thought she was Australian. More testing is better. And yes, I've been here since the beginning. She's just lurking and working and rhyming and timing. It's all good. 2 more minutes. Okay, so we're going to close out the chat here, or not the chat. Sorry, close out our poll. 74% saying yes, that's good. We will end the poll there. Did you guys in the comments tell me what your go-to method for getting the stubborn damper bolt off an LS? Make sure, if you haven't, make sure that you do. And also, who in the live feed here, who has gone to see or is going to see Jamie Lee Curtis in the new Halloween movie? What is the smallest cubic inch motor you've had on the dyno? What was the lowest horsepower you've ever run on the dyno? The smallest motor that they've run, the smallest one I've run is a B16, so it's a 1.6 liter. They probably have run something, they may have run something smaller than that. I don't know. They've run some stuff for Jay Leno, and he's had some little Lotus motors, but I don't think that those were 2 liter Lotus motors. I think that they were smaller than that. But maybe they were. I wasn't here when they ran those, but the smallest one I've run is a B16. No horror flicks for you, no modern movies. So you haven't seen like the Avengers or Ford versus Ferrari at least. Scuba tank pressure and a 1-inch drive gun. That'll do it. Heat and an impact gun. How many more superheroes can they throw at us and not expect fatigue? I agree with that, and I'm a huge fan of superhero stuff. I'm glad that they finally give it its like just due, but some of them are not as good as others, obviously. Check out Samaritan with Sylvester Stallone. I would like to see that. Skip the Rings of Power. I haven't watched that. And I haven't watched the new Game of Thrones stuff either, even though I binge watched all of the original Game of Thrones stuff and would stay up all night watching, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 of them, whatever. It was a lot. So the 4.5 liter cruiser is torqued to 320 foot-pounds. That's a lot. So I need to, are you guys are suggesting a fire stick? That's what I need to get? Christine, yeah, that's old Stephen King stuff. Deadpool is it? I'm definitely in. I definitely like Ryan Reynolds. I'm a big fan of Deadpool. I'm glad that he finally got to get that thing made. I mean, he was trying for 11 or 12 years, I think. I also like I like all of the Keanu Reeves movies. I like Jack Reacher too, Tom Cruise, but the John Wick. I like the John Wick movies too. King of the Mountain, My Side of the Mountain, all the mountain movies, really. The first Matrix was good. The other ones I didn't like as much. The first one I thought the whole premise was fantastic. And I like that the new Deadpool's coming out, and I like that Hugh Grant is in it. Hugh Grant, Hugh Jackman. Hugh Grant would be different. He'd be a different Wolverine. Collateral, yeah, with Jamie Foxx. Audiobook Star Wars, Darth, Bane, all three books are awesome. Listen to them. The Green Mile was very good. Yep. King of the Mountain. I'm familiar with it. He had a speedster. I've seen the movie. That movie is why when I came down to Southern California, I had my 260Z with side drafts and suspension and all that stuff on it. And when I came down to Southern California after seeing that movie, I started working at, I think then Miller's Outpost, and I came down and walked in and said, "Hey, okay, where's Mulholland Drive? Where's everybody going racing?" They're like, "What are you talking about? Like, you guys are obviously not like hill racers, right?" I thought that everybody was. Oh, Tombstone, I Am Your Huckleberry. Yes, I'm Your Huckleberry. That was very good. On Any Sunday, that's right. That was a motorcycle movie, right? Way back. I remember going to see Le Mans in the movie theater. It was very impressive. Being John Malkovich. I like all the Expendable movies too. I like the fact that and I like the one that they had with Chuck Norris in it as Lone Wolf. I do everything alone. That's so good. Shawshank is good. Cuckoo's Nest, awesome. We watched Cuckoo's Nest. I actually watched that in school, and we had to do I want to say a dissertation on it, but it was an oral thing, and so we had a discussion about it, about all of the Christ characters and all the things. It was really interesting, but that is an amazing movie. And the lady who played Nurse Ratched, I think, recently died. I do watch as a matter of fact, today I saw a couple of clips or whatever from like Chuck Norris, Chuck Norris commercials and stuff, and they're awesome. I love that they used Chuck Norris on the Dodgeball movie. Talking about cars is a lot cooler. But what if we talk about cars that were in movies? Corvette Summer, Lords of Flatbush, Vanishing Point. What was the one with the Cobra and Tony Danza? Somebody tell me. Or he's going to get his rail job out and race. Gumball Rally with Emergency Plan Alpha. Yes, very good. Hollywood Nights. That's right. That was good also. One was awesome. Even today, which my kids are pretty jaded because of all the amazing cars that they have, but that scene where they're driving the Lamborghini is just amazing. Richard, try to build an LS53. Can you really get 500 horsepower from a Phytech Ultimate LS EFI 500 horsepower? Do you mean will that setup supply the amount of fuel that you need if you have a motor that makes 500 horsepower? Casey, I didn't see the remake of Vanishing Point. Billy Jack, that's right. And the trial of Billy Jack on 60 Seconds. Both of them. Although the original one was better. Do you have a Lamborghini? No. And I don't have Adrienne Barbeau either, although my wife is all of that. You ever seen the cars that ate Paris? Is that the Ferrari F40 one? Death Race 2000. That was with David Carradine, right? Originally. Tropic Thunder. Yep. Who makes a two-piece Ellis timing cover? The guys at Speedmaster do, but I've never tried putting one of those. TP made them a long time ago, and the mating surface kind of leaked, and I'm sure other people do. Tony, have you ever seen the Happy Hour and Horsepowers? Yeah, Carradine was Frankenstein. That's right. Last American Hero. How would somebody meet you in person? The question is, why would you want to? I've had lots of people walk up. In fact, my wife and I have been doing. It's happened a number of times that people have walked up while we're doing our Happy Hour and Horsepower, which is also our date night sometimes. And I love when she comes because she's way funnier. But we've had people up, and then sometimes I'm out and about, and I had people walk up, and which surprises me in what I think is a small town. It's not really that small anymore, but it surprises me that people walk up, and because everybody, and even though my family's been there for 5 generations, everybody knows Lisa. She's brand new there. I brought her there, but she's a teacher, so everybody, all the kids, and the families and stuff all come up. Casey, yes. Emergency Plan Alpha was Linda Vaughn. And Raul Julia as the Italian driver. First rule of Italian driving. Tony, it's Happy Hour and Horsepower. Richard does kind of resemble the main villain from John Wick 3. The sushi skills. He did have game, you got to admit. Although he led his henchmen, which in my opinion were better than he was anyway. But he let John Wick go through all this stuff and just kind of soften him up and tenderize him. And I like the fact that they were making fun of him while they were doing this, and also that they gave him time to gather himself back together, and then he ends up beating him, and then he lets them go because again, you're showing courtesy to your fellow warrior, which I thought was awesome. The mutual respect thing, that's important. That's like what you do if you go race against somebody and he beats you, you walk up and shake his hand, and then you try to get better the next time. You don't grudge the guy for doing better than you or leaving you at the light and you're sitting there eating a sandwich or whatever. You go shake the guy's hand, and then you try to do better next time. That makes you better, and it also makes you better because you've demonstrated character. That's lost. It's a lost art, I think. People need to do more of that. Goldfinger and Goldmember, all of those. Goldmember wasn't as good. The first 2 Mike Myers movies, I think, were better. Power Hour season is always good. Oh, the crane chase in Terminator 3. Yeah, that crane company has been in a lot of movies. I think that they realized that it was good marketing for them. Yeah, the 2 minutes, it has turned into 20. That's right. Sloppy Stage 2 is a good budget cam. It is. Fast and the Furious and Street Outlaws ruined car culture. Why did they ruin car culture? they did the same thing that, I mean, if you go back and watch, and which the movie Baywatch I liked because I liked the interaction, but if you go back and watch episodes of Baywatch, it really is, and I thought I loved that they made fun of themselves when they were talking about that the people in Baywatch are trying to solve like international jewel thief rings or whatever while they were lifeguarding, and I love the fact they made fun of that. But and the Fast and the Furious did the same thing. It wasn't just about street racing. Otherwise, it should be about two guys that, in fact, I've written something like this. It's about two guys that are trying to get at each other, and one is a bad guy and he's playing dirty, and the other guy's trying to do the right thing. It could be a really good story about that. But while car guys might watch something like that, we are a very, very tiny audience. It needs to go out to mainstream where you jump over bridges that are raising up, and you shift 15 times and you make 50 pounds of boost, and how much power is that thing making? 2,000. No, try three. Yeah, it's a 3,000 horsepower Challenger or whatever. People need to have, it needs to go big. It needs to be much bigger for the average guy, and because they're used to seeing New York get destroyed by aliens, so that level of stuff has to happen. Yep, danger to the manifold. You blow your welds, granny shifting, titanium. What did he have? Titanium valve springs. Richard, I need to send you a picture because I have a question no one can answer about a Holly bloat. If no one else can answer it, the odds of me being able to answer it are pretty slim. I shall try. I shall try. Captain Sinbad. What movie was that from? I just gave it away. So what was the line that came into mind, Tony? So we sold 10,000 older movies? It seems like a lot. I can answer anything. It just might not be accurate. Oh, the Chiefs went bankrupt. The Bills got them. I get. Oh, you own a video store. Well, that makes more sense. I thought you were selling them on eBay. Larry Keller had the most amazing video store in the 90s. Horror selection was done up like a haunted house. That's cool. So did you have Jay and Silent Bob sitting out front? Was your video store next to the Quickie Mart? And most importantly, do you have Clash of the Titans? And not the later one with Sam Worthington, the original one, with the guy that was from L.A. Law, right? Although, what is her name? Oh, Gemma Atherton, though, in the second one she's a cutie. Admiral, I don't know what an MT82 transmission is, so I don't really have an opinion on it. With bad skeleton, no, don't say bad skeleton animation. You spelled the word awesome incorrectly. Do you ever put sealer around the gaskets on the oil pump? On which oil pump? Not on an LS, right? Harryhausen, yep. I like the old Sinbad movies with what is it? Claymation? Healthy Heads are not a practical stop. Really, they're not. Yeah, the stop motion stuff's cool. The MT82 is a 6-speed manual flying behind a 2011 current V6 and GT Mustang. Cool. Stop motion animation, yep. Airplane Spaceballs, both of those are good. So did anybody ever answer me whether they had Jay and Silent Bob there? Oh, there's only 2 minutes left. Ford. Oh, a small block Ford. I do use gaskets on those. Admiral, I've never seen one of those. I don't think I've ever been in the V6. I don't think I've driven a V Camaro or a Mustang. I don't think I've driven one. Obviously, I need to. Just a dab of black sealer on the gaskets. I usually don't even put sealer on the gaskets. The only time I put silicone on the gaskets is if I'm trying to hold it up while I'm putting the pickup on or the pump on. And the pump is laying flat on the Ford, so usually the engine for me is turned upside down, and then we put the pump on that way, because that way we could stick the oil pump drive in. Yeah, Tony, he did Dead and Loving. I saw that. I've either had or have every movie you guys have discussed. See, you're in good company. Well, present company excluded. Rented a 6-cylinder Mustang that'll spin the tires from the time you leave until you return. You know, I didn't. I have driven a V6 Mustang. I think it was a V6. Pretty sure it was. We rented one in Hawaii. It was ridiculous. We took a trip to Hawaii with my boys, my wife and my boys, and we're bringing, because you overpack, so get like 15 suitcases, and my wife rented a car and brings it over, and I'm thinking minivan or Jeep or something, and she drives up in a Mustang, and it's a convertible Mustang. I'm like, where? You should have seen us. It was like the Beverly Hillbillies, like driving around and stuff. It was ridiculous. Do you have a channel that shows you working on the engine that you test? Yeah, this channel does. There's over 1,000 videos, and there's lots of them. And every engine that you see on there, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, are all ones that I've built with me, swapping all the heads and the camshafts and stuff. Or so then I have to get going. Obviously, I got work to do. I've got to go look at 4.8 stuff. I got to make a list of all the things that I need for that, so I can go when I go over to my storage and climb over everything. But I can put that one back together. I have to get lots of stuff, so I'm gonna have to search through a bunch of old boxes and stuff of leftover LS lifters and timing covers and all kinds of stuff. So I'll have to go over and get all that done. That's my life. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. Man, that should end all, but there's another one.